This is interesting. It was in the Washington Examiner. The president's top economic advisor said today that this fall's hurricanes made economic growth look slower than it really is, adding that we're at 4% GDP growth, basically. Now, Gary Cohn made that statement today. With the tax plan, we're going to easily see 4% growth next year. We have that. That's massive.
Peter Strzok is selected to be on Mueller's team after all this history, put on Mueller's team, and then he's removed for some pro-Clinton text messages. I mean, there are all kinds of people on Mueller's team who are pro-Clinton. There's been all kinds of stories. PolitiFact reported 96% of the top lawyers' contributions went to Clinton or Obama. But Peter Strzok, the guy who ran the Clinton investigation, interviewed Mills, Abedin, interviewed Secretary Clinton, changed gross negligence and crime to the term extreme carelessness, who ran the Russian investigation, who interviewed Mike Flynn, gets put on Mueller's team, and then he gets kicked off for a text message that's anti-Trump. If he kicked everybody off Mueller's team who was anti-Trump, I don't think there'd be anybody left. So there's got to be something more here. It can't just be some text messages that show a pro-Clinton, anti-Trump bias. There's got to be something more. And I'm trying to figure out what it is. But my hunch is it has something to do with the dossier. Director, did Peter Strzok help produce and present the application to the FISA court to secure a warrant to spy on Americans associated with the Trump campaign?
Congressman, I'm not prepared to discuss about a FISA process in this setting.
We're not talking about what happened in the court. We're talking about what the FBI took to the court, the application. Did Peter Strzok, was he involved in taking that to the court?
I'm not going to discuss in this setting anything to do with the FISA court applications.
Are you backing off your stance from last month where you said we will not leave here in December without a DACA fix?
No, I stand by that statement. We will not leave here without a DACA fix. Yes, ma'am.
Two questions back on DACA.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you changed your mind at all about being willing to accept some border wall funding or immigration crackdown funding within a DREAM Act fix?
I don't know. When you say, have you changed your mind? We said to the president the night he agreed to the DACA legislation that we have a responsibility to protect our border, and we think there are many things we can do working together to do that. And members have been working in a partisan way to address that. So we're not backing off anything, and including meeting the needs of protecting our border. We're not going to turn this country into a reign of terror of domestic enforcement and have the DACA, the dreamers, pay that price. But I'm optimistic. I always have been. God is with us on this. Our country is great. We know that greatness springs from the vitality that newcomers bring to our country. 30% at least of the American people support the dreamers. And I had some members at the president's holiday event the other night. He called it a holiday event, by the way. It wasn't a Christmas party. It was a holiday event. At that, the Republican members were saying to me, this is 80% in my district. People support the Dreamers. And I've had some of their spouses say to me, we have to get the DREAM Act. So this says, again, bipartisan support. We can find our common ground.
All right, Nancy, it's God wishes this for us. God is with us in all of this. Then, of course, earlier, it was a pretty epic showdown yesterday with Christopher Wray, the FBI director, and many of the people in the Freedom Caucus. The one person you heard, that one voice that you heard was Jim Jordan, a frequent voice on this program. Joining us now are Freedom Caucus members Dave Brad of Virginia and Warren Davidson of Ohio. First of all, Dave, I'm sure you're pretty proud of our mutual friend, Jim Jordan. I thought he and a few others on yesterday before the FBI director did an amazing job in laying out the case of just how bad things have gotten.
Yeah, no, thanks for having us on, Sean. Yeah, Jim's just an absolute American icon. He's just a truth teller. He just always emphasizes telling the truth, keeping your promises to the American people. You just see him keeping it very simple, highlighting the corruption one by one, and then Meadows and Gates and Davidson. And we got a bunch of great guys in the Freedom Caucus that have been leading the fight.
Yeah, well, let's talk specifically about all of this, because this guy Peter Strzok is in the middle of everything. First, we know that he and Comey literally, they got Hillary off the hook because they didn't do an investigation and they just wrote an exoneration letter. Of course, he's the one that changed the language from gross negligence. Then you got, of course, he's up to his eyeballs in that Clinton bought and paid for phony Russian dossier that was meant to influence the American people. Then, of course, we've got the Uranium One deal and, you know, people like Mueller and Rosenstein and a whole bunch of other people. They knew because they had an FBI informant on the ground that recognized Vladimir Putin's intentions of getting a foothold in the uranium industry in this country. And there was bribery and extortion and kickbacks and money laundering, and they did nothing. And then they allowed the Uranium One deal to go through. And meanwhile, we don't have enough uranium as a country ourselves. And then it's Comey, and then it's Mueller, and it's Mueller's team of, Trump hating Clinton supporters. So I don't think if I wrote a novel, Dave Bratt, in any way anybody would believe that this is possible in the United States.
Yeah, well, thank God for people like you who keep those lists and go over that night by night by night. And then what we need, and we just had a blue wave in Virginia, right? I mean, the Democrats are enthused. They're drip, drip, drip. They own the media. And so all the Republicans and grassroots and populists and Trump fighters out there need to get on board your train and need to write your newspapers. You need to tell your Republican committee to grow a spine. You need to call your congressman and say, where are you at on this? And you also need to hold the Democrats' feet to the fire. Our press never asks, my senators, Mark Warner and Tim Kaine, the Democrats, what are your views? The press asks us every controversial question every morning to fight against our side. But we need to get blog sites and conservative energy going again to fight back against this corruption. And you're the leader of the charge, you and Rush and Laura Ingraham and all this bunch of the good hosts at night that do a great job. And so I applaud you. Keep it going because the best thing is when you have an informed conservative body.
It takes every night a good 15 minutes to put it all together in a way that's understandable because there's so much information and so much evidence about this. Warren Davidson of Ohio, let's get your thoughts generally on the investigation about Mueller, about Hillary Clinton and her involvement, the fact that they literally, the fix was in her particular case, and then the way they treated, of course, General Flynn.
Yeah, you say investigation, people keep using that word. It reminds me of Princess Bride. I don't think they know what it means. It looks a lot more like an inquisition. I hope we're surprised, but more and more it looks like you've got a conspiracy of sorts to try to trump up a whole reason to have an investigation. And so if Jim Jordan's thesis is right, and Matt Gaetz did a great job of unearthing that the whole premise goes back to wrongfully obtained information on a fake dossier that leads to a corrupt FISA warrant to tap a political campaign. I mean, this is much bigger than Watergate was, if that's true. And what's really disturbing is the Justice Department is not complying with congressional requests for information. They're not responding to subpoenas. And so, you have the same structural problem with the Justice Department in that sense that we had when Loretta Lynch was Attorney General.
Let's look at one point in particular. Let's focus on this one. And Dave Bratt, I'll ask you first. So it took a long time, but we finally found out that it was Fusion GPS. Now, people say, well, Fusion GPS was hired as an op research firm for a Republican. Yeah, okay, but that was long before Fusion GPS ever hired Christopher Steele, the former MI6 agent from Great Britain. But anyway, so Hillary Clinton, we now know, bought and paid for this dossier. We know that Christopher Steele paid good money to Russian operatives to produce the salacious lies about Donald Trump, all in an effort to spread Russian propaganda and influence the American people. And the scarier part of this is the likelihood, now that we know that Bruce Orr in particular met with Fusion GPS and met with Christopher Steele, and they all knew about this dossier. They should have known it's false, but the FBI may have even been involved in funding some of this. It's an open question at this point, but was it used as a weapon and as evidence to go before a FISA court or any other court to get a warrant to spy on candidate Trump and other officials, or President-elect Trump and other officials? It would appear that may be very likely, Dave Bratt.
Yeah, well, I think it does. Warren just got done laying it out, and you laid it out, and then you ask yourself the bigger question: why doesn't it move forward? And I mean, can you just comprehend the world if President Trump wouldn't have won? So you're seeing what it's like to drain the swamp and try to clear out the deep state at the State Department, the FBI, the CIA, et cetera. And there's just tremendous pushback, and that's the real challenge that faces us right now. You're making the case, Warren's making the case, Jordan just aired it all out, and now you have to affect those institutions. And that's the hard part, because they have just floors and floors and floors of Democratic operatives hired over decades. And, since the 60s. And so that's the real challenge in front of us. And President Trump, of course, has been leading that fight, and he's trying to drain the swamp, but it is incredible the fight he's in, and he needs our full support.
Why couldn't we get an answer yesterday?
Say it again, Sean.
Why couldn't we get an answer if the fake, phony Hillary Clinton bought and paid for dossier was used to get a warrant on an opposition candidate?
Yeah, well, and that's what we got to do. I mean, if he won't answer the question, they all report to the president. So either the president or Pence should come on down and just provide us the answer. Right? I mean, we need to have the few key questions that are as important to the continuation of this republic is this question. The president himself ought to weigh in, or the vice president ought to weigh in and go in front of the media and just throw this thing and use the bully pulpit to its full effect. And yeah. I think that is a huge way forward for our
Warren Davidson, do you think the president should do that, or does the president have the authority? And where's Jeff Sessions?
Well, that's the real question. I mean, I'm a huge Jeff Sessions fan, but I've just been stunned by some of the actions here. And you look at some of the things in a FISA warrant are classified, but the evidence presented to the court isn't. So there's no real good reason. Even in a classified setting, they should be able to go and say, well, I can't answer that here, but I'd be happy to meet you in the SCIF. Now, what I'm getting from friends that are involved in this more directly, it's not my committee of jurisdiction, is that even in the SCIF, where you would compartmentalize this information, they're not sharing the answers to this. And so we should know what was the FBI's role. And given that it's part of the Department of Justice, this is, like I say, this is the ongoing theme. It's time for justice to return to the Justice Department.
All right, take a break. We'll come back. We'll continue. Dave Bratt, Congressman, Virginia, and Warren Davidson of Ohio. Right, as we continue this Friday, Sean Hannity Show, Freedom Caucus members, Dave Bratt, he is with the Commonwealth of Virginia, Warren Davidson of Ohio. All right, going over this entire mess that has been created by Robert Mueller and this team of Hillary Clinton sycophants and Trump haters that he has around him. And, of course, Comey, who got this all started, had the fix-in for Hillary Clinton along with another Clinton lover, Peter Strzok. What do we do to untangle the cord here, untangle the mess that's been created if we're going to be a country that has equal justice under the law? Dave Bratt.
Yeah, well, I think several of the chairmen were running investigations under Goodlatte and Judiciary in the House and then on the Senate side. But all these guys need to get coordinated on this deep state issue, and they need to hold these institutions to account in some way. And it is incredibly complex, but I mean, you've laid out the case, and it's clear, and it's been clear since the Clinton corruption, going way back to Bill. We've kind of had the goods, but then it's like justice disappears once it gets up to the highest level. It's kind of like the elites do some trades, and there's two standards of justice, one for the elites and one for the average person. Look, this populist movement from Bernie all the way through Trump has said the American people have caught on. They know what's going on. And so I had a big election against that corruption, but the people need to send more fighters up here, and they need to start leading the charge in the newspapers and explaining and building up a conservative movement again to fight back. The left is really energized. You saw it in Virginia. They are ready to roll.
You're not getting a lot of enthusiasm from some of the base in the party because they're disgusted with the lack of accomplishments. And I have less criticism, certainly, of the House than the Senate. You guys passed 300 bills. They passed only a couple this year. In the Senate, they've only given approval and confirmed half of the president's nominees that he sent up there. I mean, there's no sense of urgency in the Senate, and people are getting a little disgusted.
That's not happening. This is in play. Israel now. We break through there.
All right, hang on. Let's go to Congressman Davidson. You're breaking up Congressman Bratt. Congressman Davidson.
Yeah, Sean, I really appreciate you calling that out because the House, I feel, we're about as frustrated, maybe even more so, because we're in this vice where the public's losing confidence, even our base, and we are sitting here going, well, yeah, we actually passed that. Well, yeah, we passed that. And you look at where we're at. We're doing we have a good hand when we come to spending, and the House passed all the right bills back in September. We worked hard through July to get that done, and it almost dropped due to a bad whip count. People worked hard to get to yes. It wasn't everything we wanted, frankly, some disappointments, but it was there for the promise of being able to jam the Senate on spending. And just as we're about to be able to do that in September, there's a CR. And now just as we're about to do that in December, there's a CR. Don't want to do anything to derail tax reform, but come December 22nd, we're going to be looking to be finally, with a good hand, play the cards, put the pressure on the Senate to say, let's fund our troops, let's run this country the way it's supposed to be.
If not, don't let anybody go home for Christmas. Let them stay and work. They've had enough vacation for the year, to be honest. I wish I had your vacation schedule, but all right. Thank you both. I'm not criticizing you. The Freedom Caucus stands apart from everybody else. Trust me, and you're the only group we can count there. I will take a quick break here. We'll come back. Kellyanne Conway joins us. Also, Christian Adams checks in. We'll get a lot of your calls in on this Friday. It's the Sean Hannity Show. Toll free. Our telephone number is 800-941-SEAN. You want to be a part of the program.
Jerusalem is still the capital of Israel and must remain an undivided city accessible to all.
As soon as I take office, I will begin the process of moving the United States ambassador to the city of Israel as chosen as its capital.
I continue to say that Jerusalem will be the capital of Israel, and I have said that before, and I will say it again.
And Jerusalem will remain the capital of Israel, and it must remain undivided.
We will move the American embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem. Therefore, I have determined that it is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. While previous presidents have made this a major campaign promise, they failed to deliver. Today, I am delivering. I've judged this course of action to be in the best interests of the United States of America and the pursuit of peace between Israel and the Palestinians. This is a long overdue step to advance the peace process and to work towards a lasting agreement.
This is a historic day. Jerusalem has been the capital of the Jewish people for 3,000 years. It's been the capital of Israel for nearly 70 years. It was here that our temple stood, our kings ruled, our prophets preached. Jerusalem has been the focus of our hopes, our dreams, our prayers for 3 millennia. From every corner of the earth, our people yearn to return to Jerusalem, to touch its golden stones, to walk its hallowed streets. So it's rare to be able to speak of new and genuine milestones in the glorious history of this city. Yet today's pronouncement by President Trump is such an occasion. We're profoundly grateful for the president for his courageous and just decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and to prepare for the opening of the U.S. Embassy here. This decision reflects the president's commitment to an ancient but enduring truth, to fulfilling his promises, and to advancing peace. The president's decision is an important step towards peace, for there is no peace that doesn't include Jerusalem as the capital of the state of Israel. I call on all countries that seek peace to join the United States in recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital and to move their embassies here. I share President Trump's commitment to advancing peace between Israel and all of our neighbors, including the Palestinians. This has been our goal from Israel's first day, and we will continue to work with the president and his team to make that dream of peace come true. I also want to make clear there will be no change whatsoever to the status quo at the holy sites. Israel will always ensure freedom of worship for Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. President Trump, thank you for today's historic decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. The Jewish people and the Jewish state will be forever grateful.
The Prime Minister of Israel, the President of the United States, and probably the most underreported yet historic thing that the president certainly has done, one of the most historic things that he has done since he has taken office, a promise that he kept, which, by the way, was not kept by 4 previous presidents that all said they would do the same thing. Joining us now with more to discuss this, friend Kellyanne Conway is back, counselor to the president. How are you?
I'm great, Sean. How are you today?
I'm good. You know, this is so important on so many different levels. Number one, It's been promised by so many people, and the promise never, ever gets fulfilled. Now it got fulfilled. And then, you know, all these people that said they wanted it over the years, oh, we can't really do it. And I'm like, yeah, you really can, and it's done.
Sean, it's pretty remarkable because not only have past presidents, both Democratic and Republican presidents, promised to do this, vowed this to do this, in part, I think, to curry favor and get votes, but you have the United States Senate beginning in 1995 by a vote of 93-5, folks. That's not a rounding error, not a close call. 93-5, huge bipartisan support to do exactly this. President Bill Clinton was in the Oval at the time, and he, in 1999, when it was supposed to become turned into reality, he took the 6-month waiver. President Bush followed followed suit. They've all promised, but as is usually the custom around here, it took Donald Trump as president to deliver. Just this past June, the Senate agreed with this by unanimous vote. And you talk to some of these Democratic and Republican Senate offices, you talk to the members themselves. And I think the one common thread is that they voted for it because they believe in it, but they voted for it because they also believed there'd never be a president to sign it into law. Look what happened with repealing and replacing Obamacare. You had the House and the Senate vote on it dozens of times. Literally, you get a guy as president who's willing to make it the law, and they can't get it through. Very similar here.
Let me go to the other big story that we have been following, and this has been an unbelievable week in terms of discoveries that we've had. And, we now know that the email server scandal that the fix was in, and the fix was in by James Comey and this guy Peter Strzok, who's a Hillary lover supporter, and James Comey, and they actually changed the wording from the legal definition of gross negligence to extreme carelessness. But it goes deeper as it relates to Peter Strzok. He was involved in the dossier issue. He was involved in interviewing General Michael Flynn. He was involved in interviewing Hillary. She wasn't under oath. Involved in interviewing Uma Abedin and Cheryl Mills. Now we know he's a vicious partisan. And, you can go through the list of scandals. Then we got the Mueller team that's appointed, and you only have big Democratic donors, 8 of the 16. And then you have someone like Andrew Weissman, who apparently was partying at Hillary Clinton's Christmas party this year, but on top of that donated money to Clinton and Obama, and has one of the most atrocious track records that we've ever seen, holding back exculpatory evidence in one case, overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court 9-0, overturned by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Tens of thousands of people lost their jobs because of his actions, and innocent people went to jail because of his actions. What do you think of this team that Mueller has put together?
Serious concerns were raised from the outset as he was adding lawyers because it was revealed that a number of them, as you correctly say, are Democratic donors. Now, everybody has political judgments and beliefs, but when you are meant to be independent and impartial, and that independence and impartiality and transparency is critical to running investigations that reflect independence and transparency and impartiality. You cannot be so blatant as to, I think, pal around with and enjoy the Hillary Clinton, quote, victory party that wasn't, which is where Andrew Weissman was, blatantly giving money, and lots of money, by the way, significant amounts of money, to one candidate. But now, Sean, what really strikes me, and what I want your listeners to know, is so much of this activity was occurring during the transition. Why? Because they didn't expect her to lose and him to win. And there's a common thread here, too, about the rush that was on to change the election results and go back and try to discredit the newly democratically elected president so that maybe he would never be seated in the first place. The other thing is that when it comes to this investigation, we're not talking about the 35,000 FBI rank-and-file employees. The president has made very clear that he respects the rank-and-file, but the I in the FBI, in their motto, stands for integrity and fidelity, bravery, integrity. And it's being called into question with respect to this investigation because there's just too many coincidences here. I have to really credit a number of the members of Congress at that hearing yesterday with FBI Director Wray. They asked the right questions about the impartiality and the partisan inclinations and predilections and activities of some of these investigators. And they did it. Sometimes Republicans can be hearing impaired at these congressional hearings. They were excellent. They really asked the right questions. And anybody who doesn't want to cover this part of the whole FBI investigation, DOJ saga, is being completely disingenuous. They've wasted over a year covering their part of it with very little to show. They are duty-bound to continue. What about this guy Orr? This guy Orr in the Department of Justice. He was on the main justice floor. He's 4 doors down from the Deputy Attorney General, his boss. And he's out there allegedly meeting with the Fusion GPS dossier makers who took money, millions from the Clinton campaign and the DNC to put together a dossier, which Jim Comey, by the way, under oath in March, referred to as salacious and unverified. It has salacious and unverified details. He changed his tune since, maybe, but go back and look at his testimony in March.
I look at all of this, Kellyanne, and I really have been hitting this really hard. And I watch. And yesterday was the first day that if anybody had watched any other cable network in the last year, all of what happened and was unfolding yesterday, they probably would have been hearing it for the first time. This has been a huge onion now that we have been literally, taking a slice a day off of that has now brought us to the point where we know a lot of things. We know that the email server scandal investigation, we know that the fix was in because they were exonerating Hillary and drafting that letter long before they had done the investigation. We similarly now know Hillary paid for the dossier. We know that the FBI was very interested in the dossier, and Bruce Orr actually met with Fusion GPS and met with Christopher Steele in that particular case. And we know the dossier was bought and paid for by Hillary and the Democratic Committee, the DNC, that she was running, according to Donna Brazile. And, you know, when you think of that one issue in particular, and then you got to really take it the next step with the Russian propaganda and lies. If everyone's so concerned about Russian propaganda, was that the predicate for the warrants that were used to surveil, now I would argue illegally, a opposition candidate during an election or a president-elect post-election? It appears that all happened.
All excellent questions, Sean, and ones that I say go to the heart of all of this now. And anybody, and I'm looking up at the TV screens right now, people aren't covering this side of it by and large, a little bit here and there. But the reason they're not covering it is that this does not support the conclusion they've already made. They've had a conclusion in search of evidence for over a year. They've wasted an entire year. And there were news reports this week that so far the Mueller investigation has cost taxpayers $6.7 million. That's fine, but we need to know that there are independent, impartial folks working on this every step of the way, not just reassigned, quietly demoted. We need to know. Maybe they should be put under oath and asked, what did you do? Why did you do it? Did you ever meet with X, Y, and Z? What would be the purpose? What would be the purpose of meeting with the person who had put together a commission, the dossier, who was paid millions of dollars by a partisan organization, the DNC, which, by the way, has no money. They wasted it all on a phony baloney dossier, and took money from the Clinton campaign, which had so much money to burn, which proved yet again the fastest way to make a small fortune is to have a very large one and waste most of it with a terrible candidate. This woman had every advantage. It tells you she's even a worse candidate than we had imagined and thought, because she had all these advantages, including this, and couldn't get it done. But people have a right to know in their government, on the taxpayer dime, folks, who is actively working against your democratically elected president and vice president. It's an important issue, and it should not go away. Those who say,
stay right there.
It's a dream that this investigation will be over soon. It ought to continue if it means adding this piece of it.
Well, there's so many things that need to be redone. I mean, you can't have the fix, and that's called obstruction of justice. Kellyanne Conway, counselor to the president, is with us. 800-941-SEAN if you want to be a part of the program. Next hour, your calls, and Christian Adams checks in with us.